Bernie Sanders is the ideological thought leader of the Democratic Party. He is the wise man upon the mountain who sits there conveying his genius to the rest of the American public. And he's stupid. But Bernie Sanders, I run out of accolades for Bernie Sanders. He was on CBS this morning discussing why America is fundamentally immoral and wrong. And this links up with the Andrew Cuomo perspective that America is inherently bad. What would make America better is if America were no longer America. If America were to embrace all of these other programs and policies that America has historically not embraced because we believe in individual liberty over collective redistribution. Right? That's the basic idea. So Bernie Sanders is on with CBS this morning, and he explains why America is fundamentally immoral. It's fundamentally immoral, and it is fundamentally wrong. And I would like my pudding cup, please, before I keel over. My blood sugar is simply too low. I cannot handle this any longer. Please play the clip.
I think that there is growing resentment, not only among young people, who in many cases are going to have a lower standard of living than their parents. I think that there is an understanding there is something fundamentally immoral and wrong about a nation in which we have three people who own more wealth than the bottom half of the American people. That does not make sense.
One of the things that you have to love about Bernie Sanders is that his take on economics is so disconnected from the reality of economics. The only thing I can think to analogize it to is the use of his hands to what he's saying. Right? They're completely disconnected. And he's just saying, he's sitting there and he's talking to you and you don't know what he is doing with his hands, but it just seems like at the end he's going to be doing the Macarena. No one understands why. No one understands why. But what's really great about Bernie is what Bernie does is he says, there are problems in life, and these problems are bad problems, and that means socialism. It's like, okay, there are three rich people and a lot of poor people. Unless you can show me that the rich people stole from the poor people, I don't know what Bernie Sanders' problem is. I don't begrudge Bernie Sanders his lake house other than I paid for it because I'm a taxpayer. But if he had actually worked in private industry and bought a lake house, then I certainly don't begrudge him his lake house. Bernie Sanders' entire priority is pointing out inequalities that are endemic to the human condition. Right? Every society has inequality. The question is not the inequality. The question is, how are poor people in the United States living? And the answer is poor people in the United States live better than poor people at any time in any place in human history, and it's not particularly close. And that's not to say that we can't have community programs that are designed to help poor people. It doesn't mean that there isn't endemic corruption to the American government that benefits some at the expense of others. What it does mean is that for him to sit there and suggest that income inequality is indicative of America being immoral is to ignore all of human history as well as any context. And that's a serious problem for Bernie Sanders in this entire perspective. Now, the good news for Bernie Sanders is that the media will never ask him about any of this. And I want to show you the evidence of this. So CBS's Biana Galadraga, she was interviewing Bernie, and they reached the end of the interview. And he's gone through 15 minutes of interview. And when they reach the end of the interview, she finally says, she's about to ask him how he's going to pay for any of this. And then, shockingly, they run out of time. It's unbelievable. They just run out. It's amazing. Watch.
Of course, the response from many is we like the ideas. How do we pay for them? This conversation, of course, will continue, but we've run out of time, Senator. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, what a pity. Oh, what a pity. Now, it's funny how the conversation always runs out of time at just that point in the conversation. Right? Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, listen, when I offered to either debate her or have her on the show, I wasn't doing so because I am just in love with the idea of spending time with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. I'm doing so because I would like for someone to actually ask her a series of questions about how she intends to pay for things. Because what happens is she goes on left shows and the media, and they say things like, well, how are you going to pay for that? And she says, well, the Republicans never pay for anything. It's like, well, that's kind of true, but how are you going to pay for, I don't know, the quadrupling of federal spending that you are now proposing? And then they run out of time. And it's highly, highly irritating. But that's the good news for Democrats. All they have to do is go out and complain about how the world is, and then they can pose solutions that have no relation to reality. By the way, this is a terrible recipe for life. Just for every individual in the audience, leading a successful life is about recognizing the realities of the world and then dealing with those realities as they are. The people who have the hardest time in life, whether it's in relationships or whether it is in economics, those people are people who refuse to recognize the realities on the ground. Instead, they rebel against the realities. It shouldn't be this way. It shouldn't be this way. Well, there's certain things that shouldn't be because it's an act of oppression. Right? The American Revolution happened because there were certain things that shouldn't be this way and that we could change. But there are a lot of things about how human beings operate that are not changeable. right? The fact is that there are certain people who are going to be smarter than others. As I know well, there are certain people who are going to be taller than others, right? There are lots of discrepancies and disparities in life. Accepting those discrepancies and disparities and then trying to deal with those, not on a collective level, but by working within the rules, is the way you have a successful society. Complaining and yelling at the moon is the way you have an unsuccessful society, and a society in which we tear each other apart and tear each other down.